It gives me great pleasure to welcome our guest speaker, Jonathan Bowden.
Right, well, follow that. I'll just sit down again, I think, after that. I'd like to thank the organisers for both Leigh and Wigan for inviting me up here. I must have spoken here 4 months ago, something like that. Here in the north, I'd like to talk in the last fag-end weeks of New Labour as the Labour machine that came in 97 dies in 2010. I'd like to talk about old New Labour and their death throes. I was a grammar school boy in 1979 when Callaghan led them to defeat in 79, and people didn't know really what Thatcher was about, and Labour was tired and it was dragging itself to the polls. I think they wanted to nationalise the sunk ports. They had no policies at all, and they flopped down. We're seeing now the new Labour project that began in a wave of hurrah and glory in 97, with people believing that Blair and Brown were the new hope. It took several elections, indeed for most people it took 3 elections, until they realised that Blair was an actor and a left-wing Tory in certain respects, and a front man, and a man who changed his opinion every other day and was equally sincere with you as he did so, and a man who's a sort of paid barrister who turns one way and says I'm with you, and another way and says I'm with you, and led us to war on the basis of lies, and has led us to bankruptcy as a nation and as a society. And Brown was sat next to him in every sofa cabinet that went on from 97, signing off on all the cheques. And it took a long time for our people to see through Blair and to see through Brown. And at the moment, they don't know who to go for, because they don't like Cameron. He may well win. If he does, he'll only win by default and by a smaller margin than Thatcher achieved in the late 1970s. People will vote for him to get rid of Brown, because do you want 5 more years of Brown? Can you imagine what 5 more years of Brown will be like? It really would be like living in Broadmoor, wouldn't it? Or up here in Ashworth, you know? He's every time you look at Gordon, he looks older. One eye's up here, the other's down here. One of the lips is dropping. The chins get longer and more like a turkey. You know, he looked 55 when he started, and he looks 77 now, doesn't he? And yet he said on Woman's Hour that he wants to go on and on and on, and that there's no end to the bloke, and no end to his government. It's grinding, statistically obsessed, and financially ruinous government. Our national debt is about £800 billion. The deficit is about £179 billion. These numbers dwarf most people, and they just turn away when they hear them. What it means is that every debt, in relation to every amount, was called in at one time, in one go. They couldn't be covered. And in reality, what that would mean is an end to all state pensions, and an end to all state benefit payments of every sort, an end to all injury and compensation claimants, in relation to people who worked in the mines and factories round here. It would involve an end to military service payments for those who fought in the Falklands, who'd fought in Iraq, whatever one thinks of that conflict, who'd fought in Afghanistan since and now, and so on. It would involve the fact that we have become a third world country, and the only reason those loans and those debts are called in to bring about that explosion is the spending of large amounts of money to stabilise an economy and its economic system underneath, which has been beaten and crushed and broken. Now, there's a degree to which some people are cynical, and are so cynical that they regard New Labour as a sort of tragedy which occurred to the society, which in some respects the society asked for. It's true that many of our people have adopted a tribal attitude towards voting. In the part of the country that I come from, people vote Tory almost without thinking. It's an unthinking blue wave vote, the way it's an unthinking red wave vote up here. Until people break out of these blocks, our people will return one government of one colour and one government of another. People like to think that the Tories and Labour are at each other's throats. They like to think that they have different ideologies. They like to believe that their personalities are different, that Brown's middle-class Scottish arrivist and Cameron's an upper-class Englishman, that the one stands for people with money and the one stands for the working class and trade union power, that they represent different values. But have a look at what these parties actually stand for. Both parties are now in favour of global capitalism and the movement of large amounts of money around the world. Both are in favour of the casino version of it, which plagued our banks, and the City of London, quarter of our economy, is controlled by the financial services sector, and which has plunged us in to this cascade of debt that now threatens to engulf and drown us. Both parties believe that Labour moves around the world the way capital does, and Labour is migration, and that's the new word for immigration. The reason that both parties believe in mass migration is to fill the holes in the world economy, to keep wages down, to keep a vast subsection of the population either out of work or semi-employed or part-time employed or on the minimum wage or just above it and just around it. Everyone is replaceable, the churn is immeasurable, 4.6 million people have come to the country and gone in the years that New Labour have been in, because people flow through, stay, stick a bit, go, reclaim, come back, and the number of people who leave the country increases at every moment. In the last 12 to 13 years, about 3 million people of our people, and everyone knows who they are, have left the country to Spain, to Australia, to Canada and elsewhere, probably never to return. And they've left because they see no difference between the Tory, Labour and Liberal machines. The Liberals are the orange-yellow bit, stuck in between the red and the blue, that provide the ideas for both of the parties that claim to be uninfluenced by them. So both of them agree on movement of capital, movement of labour. Labour say there should be virtually no restrictions on immigration, and it appears that none too artificially, but quite deliberately, New Labour between 1999 and 2003-04 opened mass immigration, and opened it again, and opened it again. Some say, the Sun and other organs of expertness allegedly, that it was even a conspiracy to do so, that they wanted to rub the nose of the right, by which they meant the Tories, in it, that they wanted them to see the reality of multiculturalism in and around them. You didn't need to see multiculturalism in and around us before 1997. You could see it in Birmingham in the 1970s. You could see it in Glasgow in the 1980s. You could see it in Bristol in the 1950s. You could see it in southern and western London in the 1960s. You could see it in Cardiff in the mid to late 1980s and early 1990s. You could see it in Manchester from the late 1960s. I spoke in Leicestershire recently. Leicester is the first ethnic city. It is the first city where white, European, British people, English people are in a minority. They're 48, 49%. Add all the other groups together and they have little in common with each other, particularly the Asians, many of whom committed genocide against each other in 1948 when India collapsed. Yet aggregate them all together in Leicester and they're a majority. A majority. We're now a minority in a major English city, and Birmingham will be soon. And every other city will go. If you live in Norwich, you'll have to wait 20, 30, maybe even 50 years until it happens. But there's a degree to which it's happening. The cities are changing, the cities are becoming destinations of change, they're becoming second, third, fourth world zones. People pass through them. 2 million British people go into London every day, leave as quickly as possible when the working day is over, because they don't want to stay. Why don't they want to stay in what was once the capital of an empire that ruled a quarter of the world? They don't want to stay because large parts of inner western, eastern, southern and northern London do not resemble anything like the city that they knew when they were young. The whole phenomenon of the Essex man, so-called, is the large number of Cockney East Enders who've moved out of the city to get away from the extraordinary changes which have occurred. Why else do you think in Tower Hamlets is the Respect candidate returned to the House of Commons? He supports Saddam Hussein's Iraq before it was exploded by American power, supports Libya, supports Arabist causes all over the world, because the people who live in